Hello everybody, this is Brent from SV Happy Jack with my wife Andrea. We were going to begin the series on our budget and what we've spent to get to this point, so that anybody that might want to attempt this in their own life would have an opportunity to. I was going to start out by talking about my interest in sailing. Basically, when I was a child, I would watch public access television. And there were two shows that I watched in Florida growing up. It was Distant Shores and Latitudes and Attitudes. And just always enjoyed seeing people in different locations and the difficulties that they had to go through to make it, to just get from point A to point B. I remember being fascinated by that as a child. And so, growing up through the years and getting into my working career, it never really left the back of my mind, that seed that was planted. And so we had our child, Caitlin, our daughter, and she was getting older. She was, basically getting ready for college, and we were looking at being empty nesters, and so we needed to make a plan. And I had come across a sailing channel called Never Monday, and basically, just like every young man, you're thumbing through YouTube, and I'll never forget the episode with the black and white bikini. And I was like, oh, I wonder what that's all about. And so I clicked on it, and of course it's Will and Kat, and they're sailing out, they're just a couple of kids like I was, and they're living their best life. Coincidentally, Never Monday is back on the water with their daughter.
Yeah, in the Bahamas right now.
Yes, making new sailing videos. And so, it's kind of ironic. Once you get the bug, it just never really leaves you. So I broached the topic with Andrea to see if she was interested. We live in Tulsa, Oklahoma, more or less. And there was a lake north of us that was about a 20-minute drive. And they offered an ASA 101 sailing class. We spent about $600. I think it was $300 per person, and it was a one-day class, and it's an introduction, but you also had to get the books ahead of time.
Yeah, so they give you the books. You're supposed to learn everything in the books, read the books, and be prepared when you get to class to just do a review of the bookwork, and then you take a written exam, and then you go out on the water and do some sailing.
Yeah, they show you the practical stuff. We had Bob Burke as an instructor from Redbud Marina, and it was not the best. Basically, he was short and grumpy, and
he didn't use any of the sailing terminology that we so painstakingly learned.
Yes, he would say this away and that away and right and left instead of starboard and port. And we laughed, and we had a great time despite everything. And there was like 8 of us crammed onto a 22-foot sailboat.
Nice little boat, yeah. And we were all supposed to take turns doing the different things and skills, and
it was tight quarters.
It was tight quarters.
So it was fun. It instilled the fact that wouldn't scare us away. And so after that, we bought our Catalina 30 that was used. We bought it in 2016, and it was a
1976.
We bought it for less than $5,000, and we invested a lot of our time. We had to repair the engine, and we did new upholstery.
Yep, we did a lot more time than money invested into that boat. Just because we're very much do-it-yourselfers. Brent here can accomplish anything he decides to do. So.
Well, and the money was spaced out over a 3 or 4 year span where we could trickle our pennies into it.
Yeah.
I was working for a company out of Switzerland called BellyMed, and we make medical sterilizers and pharmaceutical sterilizers, and I had won an award from the company, and it gave us a respectable amount of money for the award, and so we used that to buy the boat, and it was a nice jump start into this what would become a lifestyle now. And so, thank you, BellyMed, for all of your investment into my life and my career. I really appreciate everything that you've done for me and my family. And so, shout out to getting us started into following our dreams. So after the Catalina 30, we took further sailing instruction. We sailed on the Catalina for 2 years in Grand Lake. Grand Lake of the Cherokees in northeast Oklahoma. And we learned and did so much in that boat. We won't even go into it here, but
it's a whole nother segment.
Yeah, we could talk for hours. If you ever are interested, ask us about it, and we'll go sit down and have a coffee. So in 2018, we found North Star Sailing. We knew that we didn't want to continue our lessons in the lake. We had become lake experts at the time, and it couldn't offer us anything more. And so we were going to go to Key West to an outfit that was called like Sunset Sailing, and it was like $3,200, and it was going to be a vacation and education, and it totally would have been worth it. But we were so close to Katie going to college and following her plans that we didn't want to invest a huge amount of money where we could invest that into a new boat that would serve our future purpose. So therefore, Jim King with North Star Sailing out of Gulfport, Mississippi, stepped in. And we spent 3 days and 2 nights on the water with Jim in Gulfport, Mississippi, learning what the Gulf has to offer. In that time, we experienced a tornado.
We made it into port with this giant storm system just right on our tail, and we got into our slip and tide right as this massive downpour and hail and tornadic. It was nuts.
It was crazy.
I mean, we just skated right in there in the nick of time.
And so Andrea and I were in the shower when the tornado touched down, and everybody's hiding, and we're oblivious.
And we're like, getting clean.
Yes, and that was a wonderful trip. Thank you, Jim. We would highly recommend North Star Sailing
charters. And he does just charters where he'll take you out sailing if you just want to experience sailing, or he'll do lessons for you. So he's very multifaceted. Look him up, Gulfport, Mississippi.
Yes. Now we did a combination class, the 103 and 104, which again is multiple books, multiple days of educating yourself prior. Andrea and I made flashcards. We learned how to tie knots. We slept with a cleat in our bed,
so that we could practice tying the cleat.
Yes, practice tying all of our knots using the cleat.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
And it was fun. It took us weeks to get everything where we understood it, but it paid off. So the benefit is after we concluded the class, we asked Mr. King if there were any other classes he would recommend, anything else that we needed to do so that we could start sailing in open water. And he said, no. He said, you guys nailed it and you're ready. And he goes, any more money invested would just be, to further your own education, but it's not necessary to start sailing. There's 2 types of sailors in the world, those that sail and those that never leave the dock.
Yeah.
And we have decidedly not been the people that stay at the dock, even when we should sometimes.
Even when we should. Sometimes we just are like, we gotta go, but we will never go.
Right. So the combined class was $800 per person approximately. And so for 2 of us, it was $1,600 for the 3-day trip. It included food. There was no other...
He fed us fantastically. He cooked for us.
Steak fajitas.
Breakfast, lunch, dinner. was set up for us, and it was just phenomenal.
Yes, it was.
We felt a little pampered.
Yes, it was very nice. And so after that, we started searching for our current boat, Happy Jack, that we're on, and that was quite the adventure. I would set off on the weekends and scour the coast, driving from Texas to Florida, just cold calling marinas and
I think
seeing.
we looked at 111 boats.
I looked at 111 boats in one weekend, and Andrea called me.
He was so sick of looking at boats, digging through bilges, just all these just dumpy, gross boats. And I called him. He was on his way home. He was like, done. He's like, I'm coming home. And I said, hey, there's another boat I think we should look at.
And I said, no way.
And it was a 30-minute backtrack for him to go back to where this boat was.
Which was in Mobile, Alabama.
Yeah. And so he's like, all right. He gave in.
So on the way home, I had to stop for some reason. I don't remember if I needed fuel or something, and I got food in my tummy, and my attitude got kind of calmed down, and so I backtracked and I followed the address to Barber Marina, which is in the middle of nowhere.
Middle of nowhere.
and we looked at Happy Jack, which was named differently at the time. Sheila Renee. And so I liked the boat. We called the owners and we asked if I could stay the night on the boat to check things out. I had to be back to work the next morning, and so there was a lot of there was just a tight timeline, an unrealistic timeline, and so they were gracious. Ultimately, they allowed me to stay on the boat. I went through the boat bow to stern. It fit all the needs we had, so I called Andrea, and we made a plan to come out, I think, the following weekend.
Yeah.
We brought our friend Chris Baker. Shout out to Chris for traveling with us. And so again, we inspected the boat. We did a trial.
Sea trial with the owners.
Yep. And then we did a haul out, all in that crazy weekend. And we liked what we saw. The boat had been, previously grounded or something, and so there was damage to the grid, damage to the transom, a little bit of work that needed from flooding internally, but the engine ran okay, and despite a couple fuel leaks and gray smoke, we pulled the trigger, and so we bought what would become Happy Jack, and it had a new suite of sails. It had a new dinghy davit system with new solar panels, and ultimately the boat has been a blessing to us. We still continue to repair odds and end things that we find from its grounding at some point in its life, but it's sound. We've gone many places in it, and we're in the Bahamas right now, and the boat has been great. And we have an endless list of upgrades and modifications that we have planned. In all, wrapped up in the boat, we have about $50,000. That's in equipment, boat costs, upgrades, refit. So if you were going to do something similar, I would say that this is the minimum point of entry into this lifestyle. And mind you, we didn't spend $50,000 all at once, but over the course of the last couple years, the couple grand that you put in here or there adds up quickly, and it helps for you to keep tabs on that, so that way when you value your boat and when you have a boat that's sound, in good condition, that you can literally take across oceans, you know what it's worth and what you put into it. Otherwise, you lose sight of that quite rapidly. So in 2020, we did our first open water excursion, and my goodness, it was intense. Again, we won't go into details, but it was a sink or swim scenario. We took the boat from Mobile, Alabama. Well, I should preface it and say, after I bought the boat in 2019, I took it single-handed for a 5-day trip from Mobile, Alabama to Pensacola, Florida, and then out into the open Gulf waters, and then back to Mobile, Alabama, where we started. And that trip was intense. Being alone on the boat, it was exhilarating. I slept 5 or 6 hours in 5 days total. Basically, the anchor that was on the boat was too small.
Way too small.
I drug anchor every night religiously, and therefore I would sleep an hour or two. The anchor alarm, which is a GPS tracking system, would sound the alarm after I exited a radius that the boat had to stay within, and I would get maybe an hour of sleep, and then the boat would drag, and we added more chain. 200 feet of chain with now a 55-pound anchor. The boat sets solid and it does not drag. In 40 knots of wind, we sit comfortably on one anchor.
Yep.
Those are the type of investments that we talk about, the $50,000 that gets you to the entry-level point. So that was the first trip out into open water, and it was wonderful. I did it solo to prove that it was safe to bring Andrea on board and that I could handle anything that might arise, so that she wasn't put in peril. So then in 2020, we did the Gulf crossing that we mentioned earlier. It was 3 nights out to sea.
3 nights out to sea.
From Mobile to Clearwater. Mm-hmm. And then from Clearwater, we continued on to LaBelle, Florida, ultimately, where we would keep the boat. But Clearwater was fantastic. We went to the sponge docks. We rode our bikes to do laundry. The marinas there were fantastic and friendly.
Yeah, had a great time. But when we got there, we were very grateful to be on land, because that Gulf crossing was.
It was treacherous. Yeah, we had 40-foot seas.
And it was January, and it was freezing.
It was forecast to be 56 degrees. It was 23 degrees. You name it, it went wrong. And so we needed to redeem ourselves. And so later in 2020, April or May, we went to the Dry Tortugas, which is, I think, 60 miles west of Key West. And we left from Fort Myers.
Yeah, we left from Fort Myers.
And so we went from Fort Myers to the Dry Tortugas. It was a 3-week round trip ordeal between working on the boat, provisioning, making the trip, and getting home, and then going back to work. And it was fantastic. We rarely talk about it because everything was perfect. We flew the Spinnaker to get back. We had like 10 knots of wind.
It was beautiful.
Yep. It just was perfect.
Great.
Yeah. It was
Night
almost
day.
boring.
Yeah, it was. We were talking about it, and it was the first time we had both gotten seasick. And we were like, oh, it's so calm. We have time to focus on
being sick. So basically, the cost of entry into getting started for us was $52,200. That's what we spent on education, the boats. We sold the Catalina 30, and so that cost that we paid for it was negated by us refurbishing the boat, getting it back into a usable condition, and then flipping it.
Yeah.
And ultimately, when we got the boat, it was unusable. We had to rebuild the engine, and there were holes in the boat that were, $50 sized. That we should have sunk the boat from day one, and so we re-glassed everything under the water line.
It was completely redone.
Yep, redid hard anti-fouling that's supposed to last for up to 10 years in fresh water. And so we didn't count that expenditure in the total cost because we sold it, we made a profit, and that essentially cancels out what we spent. And that boat was invaluable in our learning experience. We got 2 years of sailing instruction on our own, learning what to do and what not to do. And so I would highly recommend to anybody that wants to advance their sailing ability, invest in your own vessel, and you will find out really quickly if you have the fortitude that it takes.
Yeah.
Because you're constantly fixing everything, anything you can think about.
Yeah. And lake sailing is interesting because you don't have constant winds, because the constant changing of the landscape as you go around the side of the lake, you're trimming sails every 2 minutes. It's something.
Yeah, it's a big education. When you're out here in open water, you can sail one direction for hours if
Hours
not
and hours.
days.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, definitely take your 101 in a lake, even if you live on the Gulf. You know, see what it's all about in the worst of conditions, because lake sailing is more challenging than ocean sailing. Ocean sailing, the challenge is the calmness of the water. Being out here in 4 to 10 foot seas and getting motion sick is a challenge.
Yeah.
So in summary, $52,200 is the cost of entry. We'll do another video on the next step, which is basically provisioning the boat and setting off. You know, making the jump to come to the Bahamas or an exotic location that works for you. So that's all for now. I'll have Andrea stop the video because she's closer. And you guys have a great day.